set.
All right, I guess we're going to get started. First of all, let me say thank you very much for having me to come speak to you guys this afternoon during your lunch hour. Let me introduce myself, and then hopefully you guys can give me a little bit of background of who I'm exactly talking about. But my name is Hanni Fakoury. I'm a staff attorney at the Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco. Quick show of hands, who's ever heard of the EFF? Okay, so only a handful of people. I see someone shaking his head. That's okay. Just so you know what I do and what the EFF does, basically we are a nonprofit civil liberties organization that basically works to ensure that your constitutional rights go online with you. And you know, we have a bunch of different ways we work to achieve those ends, whether it's through legal work, which is what I do. I'm a lawyer. We have activists, we have technologists, we have web developers, we have a whole kind of community of people who are working together, thinking about how we can keep the internet and technology open and free and robust, and you know, get the government's hands off of it, so to speak. To give you guys a little bit of background on the specific types of work I do at the EFF, my focus and background is in civil liberties issues. So that really means privacy and free speech. What I want to talk to you guys today about is the fight for internet freedom. Now, it's kind of perfect to be sitting here talking to you folks today, given what's been going on in the press in the last couple of days, you know, with this Petraeus email thing, because it really demonstrates the, and hopefully everybody knows what I'm talking about, but if not, you know, in a nutshell, the director of the CIA had to resign on Friday because he had an affair. And that's not that remarkable, or even, I don't particularly care about that. But what's fascinating about that example is it's a really wonderful illustration of just how poor the privacy protection under the law is when it comes to your email. And in a nutshell, basically, in the Petraeus thing, the FBI was able to get its hands on years of email correspondence between the director of the CIA and his mistress, as well as other kind of bit players, much of which it was able to get without a search warrant. We're actually going to talk about that in more detail later. But my understanding is I'm talking to people who are interested in computer science as a field, who maybe haven't really been sitting and thinking about civil liberties issues. Maybe you're a software developer, maybe you're someone who wants to build programs and build machines, and that's great. And you may be thinking, well, why the hell does, you know, this battle for internet freedom and these constitutional rights, how do they affect me? But the reality is they do affect you. And they affect you not only because it impacts your ability to speak freely on the internet, to have your communications remain private, but it's important in understanding these, you know, areas of the law when you do develop your software, when you do make decisions about how you're going to you know, develop technologies, develop programs, develop hardware. And if you start thinking about these things from the very beginning, we can all, you know, actually improve all of our kind of legal rights together. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail. Okay? So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to talk to you guys for a little bit, and then I'm going to open it up for questions, and you're free to ask any question that I can possibly answer. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you I don't know and point you in the right direction. You know, I would love to hear from you guys too. So in this, what I've termed this fight for internet freedom, you know, really we have two battlefronts. And these are the two battlefronts I'm going to talk to you folks about today. The first is with respect to free speech, and the second is with respect to privacy. So the First Amendment, it's up there. This is what it says. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble to petition the government for redress of grievances. Okay, blah, blah, blah. In a nutshell, the government cannot stop you from speaking and cannot criminalize you for speaking. Now, it's obviously a little more complicated than that when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, but this is something, this is an area where we're seeing a tremendous amount of encroachment, particularly when it comes to online communication. We're going to talk in detail about that. And the second battlefront is with respect to privacy. This is the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment generally says that in order for the government to search something that you have, they got to have probable cause and get a search warrant. This is a picture of the FBI taking a computer from Mr. Petraeus' mistress's house. And, you know, if you don't believe that these issues are relevant and important, all I would say is just turn on the news, and you'll see how these issues surrounding the Fourth Amendment and the First Amendment are at play. So I'm going to start by talking about free speech under the First Amendment, and then we're going to talk about the Fourth Amendment. One of the ways that free speech is being abridged is with the removal of content from the web. There's a lot of different examples, but here's one I want to talk to you about. And what you see, this is a picture of the video, The Innocence of Muslims, this kind of controversial video that was put on YouTube and everyone went ballistic over it. You know, when that whole controversy was kind of in play, there was I wouldn't necessarily say a request, but there was at least some discussion amongst government officials here in the United States about whether there was any way to get YouTube to take the video off of its website. And ultimately YouTube said no, the First Amendment provides enough protection here in the United States that removal of content that's inflammatory, that's offensive, that people perceive to be rude, that's not enough to get something taken down. But in other countries, their speech protection is not as strong as it is in America. And here, if you look at these charts, and maybe it's a little bit hard to see, but basically Google keeps a record on their and they have a website where you can see all this data called their Google Transparency Report, where they keep a record of how many times governments, and this is specific to governments, how many times governments go to Google and ask Google to take websites down for whatever reason. And you can see the different types of reasons that are used to justify requesting Google to take something down. And the number one reason is defamation. Does anybody know what defamation is? It's when you, yeah, go ahead.
Ruining someone's reputation.
Yeah, it's saying something that's not true. It's lying, right? And, you know, one of the great things about the web, which is also probably one of the bad things about the web, is the idea that we can spread information quickly, and some of that information can be accurate, and a lot of that information can be inaccurate. And, you know, in other countries, defamation is used to take content from the web down. And when the government does that, that's an abridgment of First Amendment right to speak freely. Yeah, so libel, defamation, slander, basically they're all different variations of the same concept, which is saying something that's embarrassing to another person that has the potential to ruin their reputation. In the old days, slander was spoken and libel was written, but they're generally grouped as defamation. There's another abridgment on free speech. And this one you may not at first blush think is a big problem, but if you actually stop to think about it for a second, it really can be. In both New York State, under the eStop Act, and in California, under Proposition 35, individuals who are required to register as sex offenders are required to turn over their online identifiers to law enforcement. That means if you have a Yelp account or a Twitter feed or your email address, you have to turn that over to law enforcement. Now, at first blush, you may say, well, who cares? People who committed bad crimes. We have to protect kids. We need to be careful what people are saying and doing on the web to protect our children. But when you really actually stop to think about it more broadly, what we're seeing is the government taking a whole class of people and limiting their ability to speak anonymously. Part and parcel in the First Amendment is the right to speak anonymously. That means the right to speak under a pseudonym. And the idea has developed over the years that anonymity is an important, crucial component of the First Amendment because it's what facilitates open and frank and free discussion, particularly when you're talking about controversial issues. So if you go to a website where you can comment, you can, maybe you'll create a fake name, or you'll use your initials, or you'll just comment as John Doe because maybe you don't want someone to know what you truly think about that thing. And we as a society, the way our law has developed, has traditionally said that that's good for free speech. That's important to the crucial spreading of ideas and the discussion that the First Amendment is supposed to enable? Well, acts like this restrict that right. And while, again, maybe nobody in here is a registered sex offender, it sets a dangerous precedent. The idea that whole classes of people can have their First Amendment rights removed. Cyberstalking laws. We see this coming up all the time. New York, in fact, has a very strong cyberstalking law. And we see cyberstalking laws are used because there's concerns about people being able to bully other people on the web. There have been a few people who committed suicide as a result of cyberstalking, particularly young people, and obviously that's terrible. Nobody wants to encourage anybody to take their life. But at the same time, these laws are being written in ways that infringe our First Amendment free speech rights. I'll give you a specific example. In Washington State, this is their cyberstalking law. It requires that you say something with the intent to harass, intimidate, torment, or embarrass, and that you make an electronic communication to a person using lewd or lascivious, indecent, or obscene words, images, or languages, or suggesting the commission of any lewd or lascivious act. You anonymously or repeatedly, whether or not